Bradley met a charging BTR-82, and seconds, not steel, chose who survived the first minute. An assault brigade moved under the trees, hatches sealed, guns steady, while quiet drones cleared the lanes ahead. The BTR-82 drove straight like a hammer, but Bradley spoke first, and the rhythm flipped before the dust even rose. From that hit, pressure flowed one way, forward, because suppression fire bought space for infantry, and space turned into control. What followed was timing, not noise. Contact at the edge, quick decisions, and a narrow window where mass could not rescue a slow plan. Deeper in the woods, another layer waited. An unmarked tool that arrives without warning, lights the night, and leaves only black metal behind. If speed beats size, the clock, not the map, will decide who holds ground by first light. Stay for the full breakdown, the field signals to track, and what this shift means for the next push. Like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for clear maps, straight numbers, and frontline analysis without the noise. The Bradley gives the assault team tempo, protection, and steady firepower as they move toward the line. And that mix turns a risky approach into a controlled start. Crews load fast but stay calm, because noise kills timing when trees are thick and tracks throw dust. Drivers hold a smooth pace, commanders keep spacing wide, and gunners keep sights warm while drones check the lane ahead. Radio traffic stays short and clear, since every extra word can slow a decision when the route bends. Maps are simple, waypoints are fixed, and each vehicle knows who covers left or right if contact comes early. This is not drama. It is discipline that buys seconds for the first real choice. The route runs under branches and along shallow cuts, so the hulls take small hits from debris, yet the formation does not break. A hard jolt means a quick pause. Checks are done in moments, and the column keeps rolling because the mission lives on momentum. Thermal sights scan shadows where a gun tube or a hot engine might hide, and glass optics confirm shapes before anyone lifts a safety cover. Engines stay at a low growl, ramps are locked, and infantry sits ready with rifles down and helmets tight. The point vehicle sets the tone, and the line follows that rhythm because one stutter can ripple through an entire lane. What looks simple on a map is work under pressure, and that work opens a path for the next move. Sensors do the heavy lifting while armor carries the weight, and this pairing makes the approach resilient. Forward-looking infrared picks up heat that the eye would miss, while stabilized guns keep reticles steady over rough ground. Laser range readouts feed quick math, and the gunner speaks in short lines so the driver can place the hull without guessing. Countermine and engineer teams mark the safe strip, and leaders keep vehicles off the edges where soft soil can trap tracks. Wide gaps prevent a single blast from stopping three hulls, and clear arcs stop friendly fire when branches block sightlines. When each crew owns its small piece, the whole formation stays sharp, and a sharp formation carries speed into the final turn. Command keeps options open as the release point nears, because flexibility beats a perfect plan that arrives late. If smoke is needed, it comes early and thin. If silence works, engines idle and optics do the talking. Suppression is assigned before anyone pulls a trigger, and dismount points are set so squads can fan out without stepping into another team's lane. Drones hold at a safe height to avoid small arms arcs, and their feeds keep the map alive with real shapes, not symbols. The last checks are simple: ammo set, elevation known, sectors clear, and the formation breathes once before committing. Because the lane is clean and the crews are ready, the gunner gets the first look at a threat ahead and chooses how to take the opening shot. Combined fire from the Bradley, 25mm cannon and guided missiles, broke the BTR-82's head-on rush, removed the spearhead, and opened a clean lane for the infantry. Through the gunner's sight, the target grew fast and centered, range numbers stabilized, and the reticle held steady despite bumps. A short burst from the M242 stitched the front arc, and the driver held the hull square so recoil stayed predictable. When the enemy carrier kept coming, the crew stepped up force, and a missile left the rail with a flat, bright burn. Impact came seconds later, the bow lifted, and flames rolled from the engine bay. Voices on the net stayed clipped and calm, while the BTR crew bailed in confusion under splinters and smoke. With the lead threat gone, the formation had room to breathe, and that breathing space set conditions for control. Tactically, the Bradley won because the firing platform stayed stable, the view stayed wide, and target switches were instant. A stabilized gun let the 25mm stay on point over rough ground, and that meant fewer rounds for the same effect. Good glass and thermal imaging turned dark shapes into clear edges, so the crew did not guess at silhouettes. The fire control computer confirmed distance, and the gunner used short, timed strings instead of long sprays, which kept heat down. A TOW is slow compared with a tank shot, yet at a few thousand meters it is decisive, and discipline keeps it lethal. In a narrow lane, angle matters more than noise, and the Bradley kept the better angle long enough to decide the first clash. Because geometry beat momentum, the immediate question shifted from survival to exploitation. Numbers favor this method when time is tight and armor is light. A BTR-82 has speed and a 30mm gun, but its protection is thin on the nose and weaker on the flanks, so a 25mm AP shot at several hundred meters can crack fittings and sensors. Missiles extend that reach past 2 miles, and even a single hit often disables mobility or lights fuel lines. Crew training compounds the edge. Callouts under 5 words. Turret arcs deconflicted, and a driver who knows how to float over ruts keep the reticle still. The result is a short kill chain. Spot, range, select, fire. That finishes inside 1 minute, and 1 minute is the currency of modern contact. When the first minute ends with the spearhead burning, the rest of the column loses nerve and shape. That psychological break gives commanders the choice to press or to pivot without paying extra risk. The immediate effect was freedom of movement and a clean fire lane for suppression. With the lead carrier destroyed, the Bradley shifted to controlled bursts, cutting likely firing points along tree lines and shallow folds. Infantry used that cover to bound forward by teams, while a second vehicle watched the opposite arc to stop a flanking try. Radio traffic tasked smoke only where sightlines were long, because white screens hide both sides and waste minutes if thrown wide. Mortar tubes stayed cold while optics still owned the field, since quiet fire preserves surprise for the next contact. Every action aimed to turn a single kill into positional advantage rather than a noisy chase. Because the advance now had depth and order, the unit could change posture without losing tempo. When speed met layers, layers won, and shock turned into smoke. That outcome matters beyond one burning hull, because it clears a corridor for follow-on tasks, suppression, breach support, and trench entry, without calling for heavier assets. It also denies the enemy a rally point, since a killed point man erases momentum and creates dead ground for the rest of the file. With the spearhead gone and the lane open, command could convert contact into control and prepare to break the counterpush. That set up the shift from a clean kill to sustained pressure on the trench line. Precise suppression opened a safe lane for the assault teams to retake the trench, and that control shot down the enemy's first rhythm. The Bradley laid short, timed bursts along tree lines and trench lips, while the second vehicle walked fire across likely foxholes. Infantry bounded by pairs, using smoke only where sightlines were long, and they cleared corners with grenades before stepping in. Fire teams marked cleared bays with bright tape, radios stayed brief, and a squad leader called the handover when the line was stitched back together. The goal was not noise but order, because order keeps casualties low and momentum high. With the lips secured and sectors defined, the unit had a stable base for what would come from deeper in the woodline. The counterattack arrived fast and low, as 2 armored personnel carriers tried to force the trench from the flank. Engines were loud, turrets snapped left to right, and dismounts rode the rails to jump the moment the hulls braked. The move aimed to shock the defenders, pin the squads in the trench, and buy time for more vehicles to form up. Yet the approach lane was narrow, and the carriers had to commit to a straight path that offered little room to snake around. Gunners tagged the leading edges with feeler rounds to confirm range, and command shifted the Bradleys into a cut that covered both arcs. This geometry mattered because a good angle gives a clean shot before the enemy can spread. The response was measured and layered, since calm fire beats hurry when seconds are tight. 2 missiles left in sequence, each called with a short count so the driver could keep the hull steady and the gunner could track the plume. The first warhead hit the lead carrier, lifted the nose, and spilled heat across the engine bay. The second found the following vehicle and stopped it cold. A third missile finished the job when ammunition began to cook off, and fragments flashed across the brush like sparks from a grinder. Crews kept bursts from the 25mm tight to avoid blinding the optics, and they cut known firing points where a machine gun might anchor a rescue. Once both carriers burned, the field fell quiet except for small arms cracks that faded as the smoke thickened. Psychology turned at that moment because a broken spearhead breaks the nerve of the file behind it. Dismounts scattered, some dropped weapons, and a few tried to crawl through ditches that were already zeroed by prior ranging shots. The assault teams did not chase. They held the trench, checked sectors, and called for a short scan by drone to confirm no third vehicle was pushing. Medics pulled a quick sweep for wounds. Ammo was redistributed, and the platoon sergeant rebalanced squads to keep every bay manned. Mortars stayed cold to avoid drawing counter battery, since guns only spoke when they paid for themselves in position or time. With fire discipline intact, the unit shifted from killing a push to shaping the ground for the coming hour. Control of the position followed, because control is the point of every minute spent under fire. Engineers set hasty obstacles on the lane the APCs had used, and trip flares ringed the approaches where brush hid footpaths. Range cards were updated, arcs were redrawn, and an alternate withdrawal route was confirmed in case artillery began to walk in. Command logged the time of contact, the number of missiles expended, and the estimated losses, which helps plan for the next resupply turn. The trench now had depth, the teams had air in their lungs, and the Bradleys had ammo left for another hard minute. With the line firm and exposure reduced, the door opened for deeper actions that would strike the enemy's guns rather than its carriers. The unit held the position long enough to breathe, to treat the wounded, and to move out on its own terms because mission success is not complete until everyone returns. Leaders set a short clock, no more than 15 minutes on the line, so exposure stayed low while control stayed firm. Teams cleared dead space, checked IDs, and logged captured kit with simple tags. Medics ran a rapid triage, cleaned burns, and stabilized shock with fluids and blankets. Ammo counts were taken by squad, not by guess, and gaps were filled from the Bradley racks. With the trench organized and time-bounded, the stage was set to shape a clean exit. Withdrawal planning started with routes, spacing, and cover, since order under fire saves more lives than courage alone. Engineers marked the primary lane with infrared chem lights and flagged a fallback turn if the road got cut. Vehicles staggered at 50 meters, infantry tucked into the shadows, and radios shifted to a low traffic net to prevent clutter. The last team on the lip left trip flares and a simple wire to slow a rush. Drivers rehearsed a short halt drill in case artillery walked in. Because the line moved like a single body, the risk of a pileup dropped to near zero. Air and indirect fire posed the main threat, so counters were in place before anything appeared on the scope. Shored crews prepped seekers, gunners called eyes up, and UAV operators widened the orbit to catch rocket trails at range. If Su-25s tried a low run, smoke would break laser lines, and guns would focus on the egress leg where aircraft are slow and low. If glide bombs showed, the order was to displace 2 hull lengths and reset arcs without panic. Every measure aimed to deny the enemy a second shot at the same grid. With those rules live, the window for hostile air got smaller by the minute. Logistics moved as a quiet spine behind the fight, because without fuel, batteries, and bandages, no plan survives a second hour. Resupply teams pushed forward in small packets: water, medical kits, and 25mm belts, so no single truck became a fat target. Batteries for drones and radios were swapped first, since sensing keeps you alive and talking keeps you together. Spent casings were swept from the floor to stop jams, and turret bearings were wiped clean for the ride-out. The platoon sergeant logged missile expenditure and flagged what had to be replaced before the next tasking. By tightening the logistics loop at the edge of contact, the unit kept freedom of action for whatever followed. Communications stayed short, clear, and calm, which is the real armor once engines turn. Call signs confirmed positions in 2 words, and leaders avoided open questions that waste time. If a lane was blocked, the report came with a fix, not only a warning. Drones relayed a live picture of likely ambush points, and the map on the net matched what the squads saw with their eyes. Order and truth moved together, so rumors did not. With clarity restored, the column could pivot without losing pace. Tactically, the hit-hold-lift rhythm paid off because it compressed exposure and preserved strength for the next demand. Holding long enough proved control, leaving on schedule proved discipline, and arriving intact proved value. This pattern also shaped the enemy's choices, since rapid displacement blunts, artillery bracketing, and robs close air support of timing cues. A force that leaves clean can strike again before the opponent resets. With the line firm, the stocks counted, and the routes open, command could look beyond the trench to the enemy's guns. That is why the next action aimed deeper, where a single strike can silence a battery and change the hour ahead. Thermite spray from a small UAV can wipe out a 152mm gun crew, and that cheap but deadly layer hits the hinge of enemy firepower while broader pressure works on many fronts. Cost is the hard math here, since a low-cost drone and a cup of incendiary mix can erase a gun worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, plus its stock of rounds. A forced gun move takes time. Break down, hook up, haul out, and every minute the piece is off the grid, friendly units can push or resupply. Dispersed batteries try to hide in smaller packets, but dispersion stretches comms, slows fire orders, and burns fuel that is already short. Counter-battery radars love a fleeing gun because a trail of heat and tracks is easier to map than a cold pit in the shade. Because the exchange favors the cheaper tool, commanders will repeat this play until the guns give ground. The deeper layer is about command and flow, and rockets make that point when they hit nodes, not bunkers. HIMARS strikes on field headquarters, relay vans, and EW tents force leaders to move, and a leader who moves cannot direct a complex fight. Cut a road with a guided round, torch a fuel truck with an FPV, and the reserve battalion arrives hours late with half its spares. CUAS teams clear the air over friendly lanes, so scout drones stay up longer, and longer eyes mean faster fires with fewer rounds. Because logistics and command bleed together, a hit on one side of the system shakes the other side a day later. This pressure runs on 3 axes at once: Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia, so the opponent must choose which wound to dress. Pinning attacks fix units in place, interdiction chokes resupply, and precision guns remove heavy tubes before they can set a new firing line. Naval drones keep reconnaissance ships further from the coast, which reduces spotting for cruise missile crews and narrows the sea window. Layered air defenses push attack jets to lower, riskier runs, and that shorter ladder gives short-range missiles more clean shots. Because the field tilts when many small levers pull together, the effect grows larger than any one strike. Watch the indicators that prove this shift is real, because proof matters more than claims. Look for fewer enemy salvos per hour on hot sectors, for longer gaps between barrages, and for gun flashes that jump around as batteries keep moving. This battle shows a clear rule. The side that shortens the loop from spot to decision to hit gains control while the enemy pays more each minute. Bradley fire set the pace at the edge, and thermite drones shut the guns in the rear, so pressure grew along the whole line. When support moves farther away and fuel lines thin out, armored counterattacks lose rhythm, and low-altitude air runs face tighter traps. Commanders will watch hard signals, not claims. Fewer salvos per hour on hot sectors, more gun moves after counter battery, and steady strikes on command nodes and fuel trucks. They will also track UAV density on supply roads and the turnaround time for mobile reserves, because speed and awareness now write the map. If these indicators point the same way for several days, the window for broader gains will open, and it will open without heavy costs. For clear maps, straight numbers, and frontline analysis, like, share, and subscribe to Military Force.